Support for this podcast comes from Frito-Lay and the 2023 Snack Bracket Championship. The Frito-Lay Snack-It Challenge is underway, and fans are voting on their favorite snacks to crown champion. We're talking about prime-time matchups between the best 64 snacks in the land. Will Ruffles Ridges reign supreme? Can Doritos defend their dynasty? Or will Smart Food use their smarts for a surprise upset? Only you can decide. Get in on all the action for a chance to win up to $1,000 or a year's worth of snacks. Let your snacks be heard. Just go to fritolaysnacket.sbnation.com to vote and enter for a chance to win. No purchase necessary. Sweepstakes ends April 3rd, 2023. Void where prohibited. Year's worth of snacks awarded in the form of 52 coupons, each good for one bag of chips. See official rules at fritolaysnacket.sbnation.com.
This is the Black Gold Banneret Podcast. Now, here are your hosts, Jeff Sharon, Eric Lopez, and Brian Murphy.
All right, welcome into the show. Jeff Sharon, Eric Lopez, and Brian Murphy with you as UCF is 1-0. We went 1-0, boys.
Oh boy!
I know
they weren't useless.
They were not juiceless, and thus they were not useless. Lots to talk about on this show. Football dominated, of course. UCF 1-0 after the victory, the resounding victory at Georgia Tech. The Knights face the ECU Pirates on Saturday. We're going to talk about that and more with Bubba Rosenbaum of the Sports Objective Podcast, which follows sports up in Greenville and particularly ECU, along with other things. We're going to preview the game and talk about some of the other things going on around the world of college sports as well. How is Murph? Before we get going on that, how was Atlanta? Tell us about Atlanta.
Oh yeah, I did everything. I got into the airport. I took the very glamorous Uber to my cheap hotel by the airport. I walked to a hole-in-the-wall Louisiana bistro joint, and then went to bed. And then went to the game the next day, and then won $100 playing poker. But I could have done that
during the game.
No, well, maybe.
Wow, probably could have.
And then flew back so really it was a really extravagant trip.
Any lemon pepper wings while you were there in Atlanta, Lou?
No lemon pepper wings. There was no lemon pepper wings. There was nothing really unusual about it. Obviously, walking around the campus of Georgia Tech on the day of the game, you could tell, wow, there's no one here. I'm expecting lines somewhere and people to be camping out and tailgating. And it's just sparse groups of people sort of walking around waiting for the gates to open. But everything else was pretty as is. It felt pretty normal. Yeah, we did our post-game interviews from a conference room. Above the stadium when the players and coaches were in a locker room below the stadium. But that was the weirdest thing about it. Otherwise, it looked like it was football.
Well, it certainly was for about three quarters there until UCF turned it on in the fourth. 49-21 was the final. What more can be said about that game than could be said? But we're going to spin this thing forward to ECU, and this is ECU's first game of the season. Remember, this game got bumped from ESPN Plus to ABC. Noon kickoff on Saturday. UCF at ECU at Dowdy-Ficklin Stadium. Spread right now 27.5 points in favor of UCF, and that's up 3 points from where it opened according to OddsShark. The over-under is 77. 70% of the money is on UCF minus the 27.5. Of course, Dowdy-Ficklin's been the home of a lot of not so great memories for UCF over the years, but more recently some very good memories, of course, including Hale Perriman, and UCF comes in 1-0 with the target on their back, and Holton Ahlers making the first start of his junior season. So we wanted to catch up on the Pirates and see what the outlook is for them coming into this game, and for that we reached out to the guys from the Sports Objective Podcast. That's the Sports OBJ on Twitter. And we heard from Bubba Rosenbaum, one of the cohorts of the Sports Objective, who's covered ECU for a long time. And here is our interview with Bubba Rosenbaum. Bubba Rosenbaum, coming to us from North Carolina. What's going on, man? How's everything going up there?
Going well. It's excited to be finally in game week for the Pirates. Of course, this was supposed to take place back on August 29th when East Carolina was going to open the year with Marshall in week 0, but it's been a long wait, but glad that it's finally here.
Yeah, that this is your first game this year with the Pirates. You've gotten, welcome to 2020, right? Everything that possibly can go wrong seemingly will. And, we don't have, you said that, we were supposed to see you guys play Marshall in week 0, and then that got pushed back to September 12th, and then that got wiped completely. And this is your opener here against UCF. Good news is it's on ABC at noon. We just got that word a couple of days ago. But tell us about the atmosphere around the ECU program right now with regard to COVID-19 and what's been happening up there, and how has the program been handling it?
We've had a couple of pauses during camp. One of those pauses was about a week and a half where things were on pause for 10 or 11 days. And so that really set things back. And Coach Houston, prior going back to mid-March, he said the program was hands down the best it had been, as you would have hoped, since he took over in December of 2018. But like most programs, didn't get any spring ball or very little spring ball in. And so that really set things back. But he was just pleased with the progress throughout camp until those pauses hit, and that set things back. And so they had to go back and install things that they wouldn't have had to. It was almost like starting over, he said. But very pleased with where they are right now. Going into the season opener on Saturday, this would have been game 4, but it turned out to be game 1. And so the biggest thing on the defensive side of the ball, you got a first-year coordinator in Blake Carroll, who actually met with the media today for the first time in a while. Coordinators typically meet with the media the way Coach Houston does things every Wednesday during game week. And he just said, what a first task, to try to slow down just an extremely potent offense like you guys, with the Knights having scored, 30 points in 39 of the last 40 games or whatever it is.
We're here with, when we talk about ECU, remember Holton Ahlers, obviously he got his very first start in 2018 against UCF. Didn't quite go the way everyone at ECU wanted to. He looked very, very raw, but you could clearly see the talent. Last year, 59%. Or 60% throwing the ball, 3,300 yards, 21 touchdowns, 10 picks. And, what I thought he did a really good job of was in the last few games of last season, he threw for 535 in a game. He threw for 498 in another. He threw over 300 each of his last 4 games, including 313 against UCF here in Orlando last year. And I really that game against Southern Methodist, when he threw for 498 and 6 touchdowns, in a 2-week span, he throws for over 1,000 yards, 10 touchdowns, and 1 interception at one point last year. But and against pretty good competition. What are you guys expecting from him, or have been expecting from him this year in terms of what he's been? The trajectory from last year. He's in his 3rd season now. What improvement are you expecting to see from him?
As you just mentioned, Holton Ahlers is a junior. He started playing as a true freshman in 2018 under the final year of Scotty Montgomery's regime. But Holton, so this is his 3rd year in the program, but he was dealing with his coordinator change last year, Donnie Kirkpatrick coming in with Coach Houston's staff, someone who was no stranger to East Carolina football, had been on Ruffin McNeil's staff, also Skip Holtz's staff. And so Coach Kirkpatrick today was actually just talking about the growth of Holton Ahlers, how last year, the first half of the season, definitely not the comfort level where you would want it, and with the coordinator change and the new offense, but really came on late in the year, Had those games against Cincinnati and SMU specifically where he threw for just over or just under 500 yards in each of those ball games. A couple of the best games in East Carolina's football history in terms of passing yardage, and really lit it up. He's a dual threat guy. He can hurt you with his legs as well. And Coach Kirkpatrick said you can see that he's had well over a year in this system now. Unfortunately, he didn't have the second spring ball, but even so, he's comfortable making some of the checks and just standing in the pocket and going through his progression with a level of comfort that he did not have the first half of last season.
You mentioned Mike Houston. This is obviously the beginning of his second season after coming over from James Madison, where he won a national championship. How was that move received, and what do the Pirate Nation and the fans think of Mike Houston here as he begins his second season after the first season last year, where you were competitive? I remember everybody remembers you gave Cincinnati all they can handle in that primetime game at home, where could have easily won that game. How does everybody feel about Mike Houston here after going into his second year?
Everything, or everyone, I should say, is pleased with where the program seems to be headed. They know that he took over a depleted roster. That didn't make it easy to go through a 4-8 season after you'd been through 3 straight 3-9s under Coach Moe's regime. But people were very, very happy to see where this program's headed, and it's a hire that a lot of folks wanted to make. It's funny, we've told this story several times when we've been on different shows, and that is that we had Mike Houston on our show back when he was at James Madison, and part of the reason we had him on is because we wanted the administration to consider hiring him as our next head coach. And fortunately for us, that came to fruition in December of 2018. It was a very quick process. We had an interim AD, or actually wasn't considered interim AD. He was a consultant, a special assistant to the interim AD at the time, Dave Hart, who's a very well-known AD. He spent time at Florida State, Alabama, Tennessee in different roles. But he and John Gilbert, who is the AD now, made that hire just a matter of a day or two after Mr. Gilbert was hired as AD. So it was a hire that most people wanted. It seemed like an obvious hire, an excellent fit. Mike Houston had won everywhere he had been, and Lenore Ryan at the D2 level took them to a brink of a national title, losing in the national title game. At the Citadel, took over a program that was really struggling, who most people said couldn't compete for a conference title, just had to hope for a 7-8 win season, that kind of thing. But they were able to get that done there, and knocked off South Carolina in the process. And then obviously everybody what he did at JMU, winning the national title and then falling just short of a second. So it's a hire, and the thing about it that makes it such a good hire in our eyes is that he had won different ways at everywhere he had been. And so he's a guy that's very well connected in the state of North Carolina, in the region, and has those recruiting ties that you would want in Virginia, North Carolina, and South Carolina to have success like we've had in the past.
Well, one of the challenges that he faces, and one of the reasons why ECU is still picked next to last in the American preseason poll, was because of the defense. Boy, did they struggle last year. You guys were near the bottom in FBS in total yardage, given up at almost 470 yards a game, and points given up at 33.7. What has been done to the defense to alleviate that problem?
Defensively, earlier in the interview, I referenced Blake Harrell. Blake Harrell's a guy that Mike Houston's very familiar with. He is on the younger side. He has been a coordinator before, but not for several years. And most recently, last year, he spent at Kennesaw State, and they were one of the best defenses in FCS football. And then prior to that, he had also been at the Citadel. Did not go to JMU with Coach Houston, but he stayed at the Citadel because he had the opportunity to be defensive coordinator there, and then moved on to that job at Kennesaw. But really brought in a lot of defensive linemen because that position group was depleted, and also a lot in the defensive backfield because really needed to shore that area up as well. And they think they've done so. Extremely green in both of those areas, particularly on the defensive line. And they do have some guys like Jaquan McMillan at corner that showed some things last year, did pretty well as a true freshman at corner. But a ton of question marks, and that's certainly not where you want to be anytime, but especially opening the season off with a offense like UCF is so potent and plays at such a fast tempo. Could be a situation where the Pirates could, not saying that they're going to score this many, but they could score 50 and lose on Saturday. My buddies and I have talked about that.
Well, wow. That'd be a heck of a game. I'll tell you what, ABC would enjoy that, a high-scoring game like that. Yeah. Do you feel that the offense has to carry this team early on, especially you're very young on the defensive side of the ball? We've talked about Ehlers, but how is his offensive line and the skill positions that he's going to be throwing to and handing off to? Does he have enough around him? Because I remember during his career at times, he would face a lot of pressure, and he overcame it, which is tremendous. But what about the offensive line and the skill around him?
Yes, the end of that 2018 season, Holton was certainly running for his life a lot of the time, and made something out of nothing more often than not. But he was definitely taking too many hits. Last year, that wasn't as much the case, but the offensive line has continued to improve under a 40-plus year veteran in Coach Steve Shankweiler, a guy who's actually in his fourth stint under his fifth head coach at East Carolina, something that's just unheard of. But Coach Shank, he has some nice pieces to work with. Some of them are fairly unproven, but he has some nice flexibility. And there's basically, I want to say, 10 to 12 guys that are going to be interchangeable in a lot of those offensive line spots. You have a guy that's a first-year center in Fernando Fry. He played at guard last year, but had a couple of centers have to exit the program early due to suffering an extreme number of concussions and so forth. So with John Spellacy and another center exiting the program, Fernando Fry made that transition. And then you have another concern at tackle. The Pirates are extremely light. You have Deontay Smith, who's very talented, and he actually had played guard very well in the 285 range probably in the past. So that's not as much of a concern with him being just 275 this year, although it is of concern. But the bigger concern is Bailey Malovic at the other tackle position at the quarterback's blind side, if I'm not mistaken. He is just 257 pounds, which sounds like a offensive lineman from the 1970s.
Right.
So, I mean, he is extremely athletic, but he needs to add another 25 or 30 pounds probably to his frame.
Get him going to some of those barbecue places over in Greenville, man. Fill that kid up.
He's one of those. He's one of those. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to step on his hair, but no. He's one of those that really did not benefit from everything that went on the last 5 or 6 months because he needed to have the July and August time in the weight room that he did not get.
I want to talk about the history of ECU a little bit, and particularly these two programs. This will be the 19th meeting, which I think UCF and ECU is the one team in the American that UCF has played the most. And going back to the very first meeting back in 1991, when Bill Lewis was the head coach at ECU. And when people think UCF and ECU, they think of 2014 and what we call Hail Perriman, the Hail Mary in Greenville, which I'm sorry to bring up because I know how. It's
the only time we've had success at the Boneyard.
That's
there was
fair.
many years there where you guys had our number there and some great games going back to Conference USA.
But what I wanted to ask was that was the last time you guys won more than 5 games. Was that season in 2014? You went 8-5 under Ruffin McNeil. Ruffin was, according to us at least, from our perspective, controversially let go after 2015. and then the Scotty Montgomery experiment happened, and three straight 3-9s, and then Mike Houston's here. UCF fans kind of look at 2014 and that particular game as like the game that basically killed ECU football for right now. Do you guys view it the same way?
A lot of folks do, yes. And to answer your question, a lot of Pirate Nation would certainly agree with you as far as it being a controversial firing of Ruffin McNeil, especially how it went down, handled in a pretty classless manner by the previous administration, by all accounts. The way he had to find out through social media instead of being communicated with face-to-face like he should have been. But, Coach Ruff, things maybe slipped in certain ways, but at the very least, especially given the fact that he was without his quarterback, Ben Kurt, in that 2015 season, in our estimation, should have received another year to get things back on track and prove that the program was, in fact, still headed in the right direction. And a lot of folks probably would say that for sure because we had a chance to have a back-to-back 10-win seasons when we had gone 10-3 in 2013. And that year, 8-5 was still a decent year for sure. But we had the Hail Mary game with UCF, and we also got beat on the last-second field goal with Cincinnati, and had a heartbreaking loss to Florida in the bowl game. So that was a season where we really felt like we should have won 10 or 11 ball games and just won 8. And after that point, it seemed as those things were pretty downhill for sure. And then maybe not, that wasn't the specific point, but because the next year we were still pretty competitive. So if it wasn't that game, then maybe the South Carolina game of the 2016 year. We'd started off 2-0 under Scotty Montgomery with a blowout win over Western Carolina, and then also upset NC State at home. And then really probably should have beaten South Carolina, but turned the ball over 4 times in the red zone and lost a heartbreaker, close ball game down in Columbia, and then just got blown out the next week at Virginia Tech, and it was all downhill after that. So maybe that 2014 game, but definitely the 2016 South Carolina game.
Coach Ruff, by the way, he's up at NC State now. Is that right, as a special assistant?
He is. He's a special assistant, Dave Dorn at NC State, and it's still tough to see him wearing red, but
I bet.
Definitely happy for him. We've had him on the Sports Objective several times. He's a friend of the show and definitely still loves his alma mater, but hey, it's a business, and he had to do what was best for him and his family, and you admire him for he hated to leave Oklahoma and his good friend, almost like a son to him, Lincoln Riley, but his dad wasn't doing particularly well, so this gives him an opportunity to be back home close to his dad and then also do what he can continue to do, what he loves, and being around young men and molding them through the game of football. Yeah,
and so you don't see too many guys in college football who are universally admired and respected the way that Ruffin McNeil was. I'll leave the last word to Eric. Go ahead, man.
Well, I'm going to bring some positives here because Jeffrey kind of brought the very down period there in ECU. But I want to ask you about the whole athletics of ECU. Obviously, I've been to ECU a couple of times. I love the Boneyard. The facilities there are tremendous for football. The baseball stadium is tremendous. Obviously, we follow Coach Cliff Godwin, who used to be here as an assistant, and the great job he's done at ECU. He's been the standard in a lot of ways in baseball for the American and getting to the supers and so forth. Where are we with John Gilbert? You mentioned he's the athletic director there. I got to know Terry Holland a little bit when they were building the facilities, and he gave me a tour in 2011 of the Boneyard, and he retired in 2012. And I know at that time the goal was to get to the Big East. We all know what happened with the Big East and all that, but how do you feel about how did Pirate Nation feel about John Gilbert and the direction of ECU athletics as a whole? Obviously hoping to improve football, which is big there, but you have a great baseball program, and I know it's a basketball program you're trying to get on the positive side. Just give us an overall landscape with John Gilbert and your thoughts on him.
Absolutely. First of all, it's awesome that you had the opportunity to meet Coach Terry Holland. Thank the world of Coach Holland, and really appreciate all he did for East Carolina, and I hate the way that his dismissal, how that went down, even though it didn't exactly come across and into the media as a firing, because that he was really forced out by a handful of individuals, and I to this day, do not understand that whatsoever with everything he did for East Carolina, because he certainly was not perfect, but he did a whole lot more right than he did wrong, for sure. But moving to your question about John Gilbert, folks seem to be very, very pleased thus far. One of the things that did, I know, just kind of frustrate some people is just a product of the times and the situation he was left in my opinion, by the previous administration, having to cut some sports. The ECU swimming and diving program had been very successful through the years, but it had won a couple of American Athletic Conference championships at least, and they had to cut it, and then also the men's and women's tennis programs. So having to cut those 4 sports was something that a lot of people, some folks understood it, some folks, maybe even though they understood it, didn't like it because of just kind of the I don't know, the optics of it. But all in all, I think most people have been very pleased with John Gilbert. He's very personable the way Terry Holland was. However, I think just being honest in some respects, while he has been an excellent communicator and done a lot of things extremely well, there are things that folks are probably still, the jury is still out on, so to speak, in terms of maybe scheduling. Haven't really picked up any big scheduling coups since he took over. So that is one thing that some folks are keeping an eye on to see how that is moving forward, because there's no secret the financial situation in East Carolina leaves a lot to be desired. So he and the current administration are forced to dig out of a deficit that is ever growing, especially with the current times with the coronavirus.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's something that we're all trying to get through one day at a time, man. And it's well, I mean, an example of the times is kickoff of this game, your first game of the season, happening so late on September 26th. But it's happening finally at long last. UCF at ECU, noon kickoff on ABC. Moved over from ESPN Plus, interestingly enough, so that's a big win for both schools in terms of exposure. Bubba Rosenbaum from the Sports Objective podcast. Bubba, where can people reach out to you to follow all the latest on the Pirates?
Yeah, appreciate that. On Twitter, it's at the Sports OBJ. On Instagram, at the Sports Objective. Like and follow us on Facebook, and also subscribe to our YouTube channel. Yes, our focus is East Carolina athletics, but we'll also have other sports figures or sports personalities of interest. For example, we'll always have an annual chat with Phil Steele. We'll talk to the likes of a Charlie Ward or a Jim McMahon or other prominent sports figures such as those that people would undoubtedly recognize if they love sports. So give us a listen. Like I said, a lot of our shows are actually on or with video, Facebook and YouTube, but then also pretty much any podcast platform, whether it's through TuneIn Radio, SoundCloud, Spotify, Anchor, you name it. If it's a podcast platform, you can probably find us there by simply searching the Sports Objective.
Cool stuff. All right. And will you be at the game on Saturday? I know there's very limited attendance, right?
I will be. There'll be 350 tickets distributed, and those will be going to 250 East Carolina parents or family members, and then 100 to UCF football team members' parents, and then also members of the media. There will be a limited availability as far as credentials. Last year we had 2, and this year we have 1. So my co-host suggested that I go to this one, and so I will, in fact, be at Dowdy-Ficklen Stadium on Saturday about 11 o'clock. It's when they're going to open Town Bank Tower, the new press box that was open last year. All
right, man. Dowdy-Ficklen, Eric and I and our partner, Brian Murphy, we all really, really enjoy that place because we think it's one of the most underrated venues in all of college sports. Just an incredible stadium, a good atmosphere, especially when when ECU is good. And here's hoping that ECU can improve, but not just yet.
Absolutely. We appreciate the kind words. We certainly, obviously, we're a little biased, but we think Dowdy Ficklen's an excellent venue, probably one of the top venues on the East Coast, especially when the Pirates are playing good football, like you just referenced. But I know my parents and some other friends have had the opportunity to attend games at the Bounce House over the years. Unfortunately, I was unable to accompany them because I was coaching high school football at the time. But I've been there, just not for a game. So hopefully I will make it down to a game in Orlando here in the future. All
right, man. When you do, we got to get together. Thanks again, Bubba. Take it easy. All right.
Absolutely. Look forward to joining you guys real soon.
All right. Stick around. We'll be right back. This is the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast.
Today's episode is brought to you by Cars.com. With over 2 million vehicles and 50,000 more added every day, Cars.com will match you with the perfect car for you, your budget, your life, your style. And if you're ready to say goodbye to your current car, Cars.com will get you an instant offer to cash it in. Just start by entering your license plate and get matched with a local dealer who will write you the check. So whether you're looking to buy or sell, just go to Cars.com. It's magical.
Welcome back to the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. Jeff Sharon, Eric Lopez, and Brian Murphy with you. Follow us at UCF_Banneret, Facebook.com/Black and Gold Banneret, and of course, blackandgoldbanneret.com. Special thanks once again to Bubba Rosenbaum in the previous segment from the Sports Objective for giving us the lowdown on ECU, who's in just the weirdest position right now, starting their season on September 26th. And they come out as 27.5-point underdogs to UCF. It's 70% of the money, according to OddsShark, is on UCF minus the 27.5. Now, Murphy, we heard from Bubba that there's only going to be about 500 fans there, or 500 people there in the stadium, all obviously limited media, and then parents or close family, literally the parents from both squads are going to be there, and that's it. And so it's not the usual Dowdy Ficklen that we're so used to, but this I always have a hard time gauging, Murph, like when you're playing a team that's playing their first game and you haven't seen them yet. But what's the sense that you're gaining from this matchup? Is that 27.5-point line justified?
Oh, it is hard to say because again we haven't seen them, but just judging from certainly years past, I don't think that line is not condemning Ehlers, who I think people respect, and certainly he's gotten some preseason love from the conference. But it's the defense. The defense was just absolute trash last year. Let's be honest. And I don't, people are like, how can they stop UCF's offense? Especially after we saw UCF, we've seen this offense once. And we saw them play an ACC team on the road, and they put up 49 after basically taking a quarter off. So, yeah, I have no problem with the line. And as far as the crowd and the lack of crowd, a lot of the players were complimentary of Georgia Tech and the way that their fans reacted to things and sort of were into the game and loud and booing the refs and made that sort of feel like an atmosphere. And I agree. I thought that stadium was louder than I expected. But the players have been asked this week about playing in a stadium with maybe literally no fans or just parents, and I don't think they're worried about it at all. I know Eric Mitchell said literally that right there is not a problem. I'm always going to bring the juice to the defense, which of course led to another reference to if you're juiceless, you're useless, which seems to be catching on by the week, and I'm totally fine with. So that's not going to be a problem. I think the only problem really here is if they let Ehlers sort of create on his own and they don't pressure him, he can be really dangerous because he's obviously, as you guys talked about, he's an athlete. He can run. He's got a huge arm, but it's the pieces around him, and he probably doesn't have enough.
Let's hear from Josh Heupel real quick on what he said about ECU earlier this week.
You look at East Carolina and what they did the second half of last season. They put up a bunch of points and were in a bunch of tight football games. It's a prideful group, year two for their staff with their players. I don't think our kids are going to take anything lightly. This is a big football game for us. It's the next one on our schedule. It's the only one that we get a chance to go win this Saturday.
That's Josh Heupel talking about ECU. And one of the things that we kind of talked about before, Eric, and I know we mentioned in our interview with Bubba, something looked like it was starting to click with ECU's offense at the tail end of last year, particularly in the second half, when we talked about the nearly back-to-back 500-yard games that Holton Ahlers had against two pretty good teams, including Cincinnati and SMU. But it looked like he kind of turned a corner there, didn't he?
He really did. And remember last year in the UCF game, Murph, we were there where they outplayed UCF in the second half, and I know that UCF had a big lead, but they moved the football on UCF. And to me, Brian, my concern, and I'm kind of your thoughts on this, ECU with Ahlers, he's mobile, can throw the football. The offensive line was much improved, as Bubba mentioned in the interview from the year before. They protected him well. And I thought UCF defensively in Atlanta, I know people focused on the 5 turnovers, but I thought they were average overall. I think they could play better. I know we talked about in the season preview that we thought this would be a strength and a really strong defense. I thought they were average, in particular in the linebackers, and PFF even graded them as average. Is that a concern based on what you saw in Georgia Tech, and one of the things you want to see improvement? Because if they don't play better, I think East Carolina will score points.
Absolutely. And if you looked at that game, you could see there were multiple breakdowns in communication, mostly in coverage when linebackers and safeties were in coverage against running backs. Georgia Tech would send a running back out just into the flat or maybe running a little route, and no one would be near him. And this happened, twice on one drive, I think, with Eric Gilliard. This happened right before the half. When Georgia Tech scored right before the half, there was a mix-up between Zamari Maxwell and Dylan Lester, the safety, as to who's covering the running back, and neither of them did. I think it was Lester's fault. There were definite communication issues there that need to be ironed out. And I think also to your point, Eric, the secondary was fine to me. The defensive line was pretty good. I thought the defensive line was really good, actually, because Randy Charlton was active. Josh Seliscar, we can talk about him all day long and what he did as a true freshman in his first game. The second level was okay, and then the secondary was okay too. But as I kind of wrote earlier this week in my checklist review, because I really wanted to see how their young corners would perform against Georgia Tech, and we really didn't get to see a whole lot of that because Georgia Tech doesn't have the type of offense that is going to challenge your perimeter corners. Jeff Sims right now is much more of an athlete than he is a quarterback. He wants to keep it safe. He wants to keep it underneath, middle of the field, so he's challenging linebackers and safeties. The outside corners, if they are challenged, it's usually on a pass that's 5 yards past anybody who can catch it. And Sims threw a number of those balls on Saturday. It was really kind of disheartening to watch. I mean, even as a UCF fan, you're like, wow, they could really be closer in this game if he was just on target with some of these really open, easy throws. And so I want to see more from those corners. I want to see more from Corey Thornton and Devontae Brown and Justin Hodges. And I think this is the type of game where you're going to see it because Holton Ahlers is not afraid, and he's going to throw it everywhere. Sometimes that gets him into trouble because last time we saw him, he didn't really know where the ball was going. That'll be interesting to see if he's improved in that area. But he has a huge arm, and he's not afraid to use it all over the field.
Where do you rank him in the conference as far as quarterbacks? We've talked a lot. Obviously, Dylan at the top, Shane Buechele at SMU up there on that list as well. Where do you rank him? We got White, obviously, in Memphis, but where do you put Ahlers right now in the league? I think he's a top half quarterback that's kind of under the radar because, we saw it last year. We brought it up the Cincinnati game. They could have easily won. They moved the football. Where do you rank him?
Yeah, I think that's about right. I think about top half, around 5 or 6. God, I forget Tulane's quarterback's name. I'm looking it up right now because he's really good too. But then he's like 5. So he's like 5 or 6. But that's not a knock. There's some like you said, there's some good quarterbacks in this conference. And I think Willie Martinez really sort of stressed it this week when we were talking to him, the secondary coach and the assistant coach for UCF, talking about how this is year 3 for him. And this is really the year where most players, the growing pains are over with. You really understand the system. You've really integrated into it fully. now you become fully realized. And I'm intrigued to see what we're going to see out of Holton in his third year. I also want to mention, because we talked about how in the second half of last year's game, UCF got outplayed. That has been mentioned, and that will be mentioned throughout the course of this week. Here's a quote from Willie about that. He goes, "We've got something to prove too, because we didn't play really well in the second half the last time we played them." And so I think that stuff is going to be pounded into the defense's head, that we're going to have to play a full 60 minutes, even if you're up by 30 at the half, because they do not want to see a repeat of what happened in 2019.
Well, that would make sense, too, since ECU hasn't played a game. What tape are you watching? Of course, you're going to show them the tape of the second half for when East Carolina outplayed you and remind them, hey, these guys outplayed you last year, so you better be ready to play for 60 minutes. Actually, I think that makes a ton of sense on that. But obviously, offensively, UCF was tremendous last week against Georgia Tech, and one guy that took notice of that was ECU head coach Mike Houston, who had he knows that his defense, which has many questions and youth, has got their hands full on this Saturday when they face UCF's offense.
Obviously, we have a great opponent coming in here Saturday. UCF is one of the top teams in the country. We saw a witness of that this past weekend when they took on a much improved Georgia Tech team, who I watched against Florida State the weekend before in their win down in Tallahassee. And, UCF was very impressive in their blowout win this past Saturday in Atlanta, and putting up 660 yards and scoring 49 points. So, tough opponent coming in here. But, it's good to start off with what has been, the best team in the AAC over the past 3 seasons. We get a chance to start off with them at home. So it's an exciting matchup for our players. They're excited about it. They're excited about, being at home for the opener. And it's, can't wait to get out on the field. So I expect us to have a good week of practice this week. I expect us to come out fired up and ready to go on Saturday. And 12:05 kickoff. It'll be good to be back to some Pirate football.
It's Coach Houston from ECU. By the way, in case we didn't already let you know enough, with 8:23 to go in the second quarter of last year's game, UCF was up 35-3. The final was 41-28. So that means in the last 37 minutes or so of the game with ECU last year, the Pirates outscored UCF 25-6, and I imagine that the UCF defense is going to hear a lot about that the remainder of the week, aren't they, Murph?
Absolutely. We've talked about it. They're going to be probably showing the game tape from last year's second half.
Yeah. And
only that, remind them of what went wrong, because a lot of those guys are back. A lot of those guys were in that game. Yeah. So they'll definitely be reminded of that frequently.
483 yards of total offense ECU put up against UCF. Of course, UCF had 611.
By the way,
yeah,
and we're still good offensively, aren't we, Murph? Last week they put on a good show. They're led by Mr. Young Dylan Gabriel, who any questions people had about the road, I think, was silence.
No, that kid is such the truth. It's I will say the first thing I wrote about too this week was how well he was protected, and he was sacked twice. One of those sacks was on a running back not picking up a blitzer. Really, otherwise, the offensive line was really, really good. And because of that, they just gave Dylan so many clean pockets. He had, 4 or 5 feet in front of him to step up and throw. And just, from all angles, from the side and from the front, he had so much clean area to operate. And when you give him that, he is surgical. And it's fun to watch because, you can throw it 20, 30, 40 yards downfield, and it's as if the guy is right next to him. His accuracy is immaculate.
And I think it's even improved since last year, too, just watching where he was placing balls. The 2 throws in the end zone to Marlon Williams were just the God-tier throws.
Jeff, it's the same play, right?
It's the same exact play, same exact throw to the outside shoulder. And the first one, which was toward the near side, I had to rewind it several times to see how that ball got to Marlon Williams, because I thought for sure it was going to get picked off. And you're talking about a throw from the far side, from the far hash. Mm-hmm. Twice they pulled that off, and you can't defend the perfect throw. That's why Dylan's the Davey O'Brien National Quarterback of the Week this week.
Yeah, and I spotlighted those two throws again in the checklist review because they were the best throws of the game. He made some other good throws to Jalen Robinson and to Trey Nixon, but man, oh man, just the accuracy, the precision, the placement was perfect. Also, the one where Marlon had to turn around to get it, that is a really good catch on Marlon's part because he's got to get that awareness around and know that where the ball's going to hit him immediately. That was great. It was just. Man, oh man, this kid is so much fun to watch when he's got a clean pocket. And then we saw this week too that if things break down, he's not as afraid and more comfortable to run away.
Yeah.
And they're drawing up design plays for him to run the ball, and he's reading the crashing linemen more than he did last year, or reading them better out of the RPO.
Eric doesn't like that, by the way.
No, I don't want him to run that much. Like. Here's my thing. The guy is a magnificent passer out of the pocket. Throws this beautiful of a football. And I would argue if he continues the trajectory that he's going at, I could make the argument he's the best pure passer UCF's had since maybe Ryan Schneider and be in that conversation with Culpepper. And so I don't want him running so much to the point where, hey, you could risk some injuries. Now, I understand, in a big game situation, a conference championship game, you want to use that a little bit. Yeah, but in my opinion, guys, I just don't think he's the natural runner that a Mackenzie Milton was. It doesn't, and I certainly don't feel comfortable when he slides. Okay.
Yeah, he's got to work on that. You can tell Dylan probably didn't play that much baseball as a kid because that slide really needs some work.
So to me, I'm okay with him being in the pocket. I know people are like, "Oh, you got to keep him off balance offensively." Listen, with the weapons he's got and the way he throws the football in a tight window. I mean, some of those, as you mentioned, those passes, it wasn't like there was a lot of space between the receiver and the defensive back in some of those throws. I just rather keep him in the pocket and air it out. Like, do you think Andy Reid's telling Patrick Mahomes, "Hey man, we need you to run 10, 12 times to keep the defense honest"?
No, but it's the same. It's the same theory, right? It's like you have to keep the linebackers honest by presenting that threat. And if he's smart about it, it'll be fine.
It's a baseball analogy for me, which I know shocks both.
No.
Shocking.
It is literally like if you have, 4 pitches, you have to make the batter respect all 4 pitches by at least sprinkling even your 4th pitch in there sometimes to show them that this could be something I use.
Okay. But here's how I'll counter your analogy there. That makes sense if you're facing Mike Trout or Bryce Harper or Aaron Judge. But if you're facing, the number 9 stiff hitter, I don't want you to, why are you wasting time with him?
I think it's because they want to put that on tape.
Yeah.
Like all pitchers too. You got to put that on tape for your future opponents to go, we got to prepare for this.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. There's no doubt about it. I wanted to, quick injury updates. That was the one thing that I think was a real issue for UCF, obviously out of Georgia Tech. Trey Nixon obviously is the one who garners the most concern. Any updates on that? I know Greg McCrae got banged up and a couple other guys got banged up. What's the latest, Murph?
Yeah, so no, we don't have firm word on Trey Nixon because, look, college coaches don't like to divulge information. This is part of the gamesmanship idea of, well, if they don't know he's out, then they got to prepare for him too. I would be shocked if Trey plays. We don't know the exact injury, but it certainly doesn't sound good from things that I've heard. But we'll see if if Coach Heupel confirms that on Thursday. Well, he's scheduled to meet with the media on midday Thursday. We'll ask him again and see what he has to say. But I would not expect him to play. Greg McCrae, interestingly enough, Coach Anthony Tucker, who's the running backs coach, the assistant offensive coordinator for UCF, was asked about Greg, who got rolled up really ugly. Very fortunate to come out.
Yeah, that was really scary when I saw it on TV.
Yeah, I mean, he got pulled down. His right ankle got rolled up really badly. It sounds like he came out, okay. No worse for wear. To use Tucker's words today, he said that Greg has been great, quote unquote, has been great in practices today and yesterday, Wednesday and Tuesday. So that sounds good. Maybe it just means he's been great in, on the sideline or individual drills. I don't know, because sometimes guys, I know this is also a shock. Coaches lie. So sometimes I don't.
No way. I don't believe what you're saying.
I know. So we'll see. We'll all find out on Saturday, right? But it looks somewhat positive for Greg McCray. Otherwise, I think the other major guy, the guy to watch was Antoine Collier, who I got to commend and laud for just his toughness. So the dude is basically a heat-seeking missile. He's never seen something that he didn't think he could just bowl right through. It's great to watch him play because he's not a big guy, but man, does he like to hit people. And in this game against Georgia Tech, early on, he ended up injuring his right shoulder or arm or elbow area on his right side, his right arm. And he was down for a while, went out of the game, came back in, and didn't stop playing like he plays, and bowled into someone else on Georgia Tech and re-injured that same shoulder and arm again, and was down for a couple more minutes, flexing the arm, and they brought the trainers out, and he came back in again. And we saw him walk off the field. He made it through the entire game in Georgia Tech. I assume he'll be out there this weekend because he did make it through that entire game. But I have to imagine that Sunday Monday was a painful day. It was a painful day for Antoine Collier.
Twan, man, don't scare us like that.
But he's fun to watch.
Yeah, he is.
Literally, he's a pit bull.
Is he like going back to he made the interception in the Peach Bowl? Has he become like the biggest unsung hero of that defense?
I don't know about that. What's funny about Twan is that he's extremely humble and not a guy who talks. Very quiet, at least with all of us. He's one of the most quiet players on this team. We've got guys who like to talk, like McKenzie, Otis Anderson, or Eric Mitchell, Richie Grant. Antoine Collier is very, very, very quiet, and I think you get that sense on the field too, where he's not really a show out kind of guy. He just plays really hard, really physical, and he's solid. I don't know if he's flashy. He had the interception in the Peach Bowl. Granted, it was he kind of lofted it up there, and he was at the right place at the right time. But he is just solid. He's he's just a solid player.
Well, I'm glad he's all right. I guess we'll have to wait on Trey. Hopefully, we'll get some good news from him, and hopefully, Greg McCray is also in good shape as well. All right, guys. Oh, go ahead, Murph. I'm sorry.
I'll find out at Saturday at noon. I'll let you know.
All right. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Perfect. Great timing. All right, I'm going to put you guys both on the spot one more time. Again, 27.5 point line for this game as of right now, Wednesday night.
I want to know what the over/under is. I'm
77.
Ooh. That by the way, that over/under has skyrocketed because I saw it last night. It was 72.5.
Yeah.
Wow.
So 77 over/under, 53% on the under. 70% is on UCF minus the 27.5, and that 27.5 shot up from 24.5 where it opened. So I'm putting both of you guys on the spot, starting with you, Eric Lopez. What are you thinking?
I'm staying away from that. I don't know. Murph, who's playing?
It's a 4-touchdown game.
Who's playing in this game? We don't even know. To Murph's point, as we've learned anything from 2020, we may get surprises on either end there. I mean, ECU's had their own issues, there with COVID. I'll say this. If that number goes up to 28.5, I might take ECU because I do think they can move the football and score some points. Now,
that hook is awfully tasty.
Yeah, so I think that's the key number there. Because I actually have been more, if this was a normal night game at the Boneyard with a lot of people, I actually would be worried about this game. I was more worried about this game than the Georgia Tech game prior to the schedule changing and everything. But I think the fact that it's a noon game and there's literally family and friends at the building, I think actually helps UCF in that regard as long as they don't have a letdown. So I'm staying away from the point spread, though. Because you can dominate the game, and Murph knows this. How many times have we seen over the years a game go one-sided, and then that team gets that backdoor cover at the end by scoring a couple scores?
Because you see a 47-20 type game or something like that, right?
50. Yeah, I mean 50. I mean 77 is a lot. That is insane. I mean that's got to be one of the highest over/unders on the board of the whole day. Yeah. I got to believe. But it tells you, but yet we say that, And you think about it, if UCF, all they got to do is score, 49, 56 points. East Carolina scores, 21, 28 points, and you're there.
Murph?
Like it's so weird how easy you made that sound. Like, all they got to do is score 50, and the other team scores 28.
Yeah. Like, what are we even talking about here?
Yeah, like 56. Like, if UCF, think about it. UCF scores 56. All they got to do is give up 24 points to East Carolina, and it's still a blowout. It's not.
It's not hard. That's hard to do.
I don't like this conversation. I don't like this.
I'm taking the over. You go ahead. You gonna take the under, Murph? You gonna take it? Go ahead.
I'll throw out a couple of stats because I had to look this up yesterday. East Carolina is 1-5 against the spread in their last 6 games as a home dog, and 6 of the last 7 games between these two teams has gone over the total. So it's going to be high scoring, but none of those games were 77. And so I don't know if I have the testicular fortitude to take that number. I would probably bet the under there. And I will say UCF, clears at 27.5, but I can't go 77. Like, let's say they win. I could see them winning like 55-20 and didn't get there. So no.
Didn't get there, but covered. Yeah, I don't know, man. I just, me with these big numbers, man. I always get frightened, especially when it's against the team that's playing at home, and we haven't seen ECU play yet. I don't even want to.
I will say this. To your point, if this game goes under, that's probably good news from a UCF standpoint, which probably means the defense played well, right? Like, if this game goes over, then probably the defense has some struggle. So to your point, if the defense plays up better than they did against Georgia Tech, it should go under. But, I think ECU is actually a better offensive team than Georgia Tech with a better quarterback. And I do wonder about a bit of a letdown there. I mean, this is, right? Like, if you're ECU, this is exciting. It's your opener, and you're playing a nationally ranked team. You're going to be all fired up. UCF better match the juice, if you will, of ECU. Yeah.
If you're juiceless, you're useless.
Yeah.
All right, now it's a dead horse. But look, it was Georgia Tech's home opener too, and they just beat Florida State, and they got trucked in the fourth quarter. I mean, it doesn't really matter.
You know why, Murph? Because we're the best team in the state.
Hey, Dylan Gabriel said what he said. Yes. Quote unquote, I said what I said.
All right. Let's take a break real quick, and we'll come back and we'll talk about that to wrap it up. All right? Stick around. It's the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast.
For me, I was always kind of put UCF. I'll see. Let's keep watching them. And now I'm to a point where they should at the very least be invited and talked about. And at the end of the day, if they just don't, if they don't quite stack up to some of the other teams in the Power Five, so be it. But at least they're there, and they should be, if they run the table, they should be in that discussion and be talked about.
But I got to say, fellas, one of the things that really stood out to me from this past weekend, especially a week after the Big 12 went 0-3 against the Sun Belt, is what Oklahoma State looked like. And I started thinking about it as I juxtaposed that to what I saw from UCF. And I think there's an argument right now to be made that the AAC is a better conference top to bottom from a depth standpoint than the Big 12 is. Now, you factor in Oklahoma and Texas and what they are. The top is really good in the Big 12, but it's been just such a poor showing. When you look at UCF, you look at Memphis, if they can ever get themselves back on the field, and Cincinnati, American has earned the reputation to be part of the Power Six at this point in the year, and I can't wait to see more from them because this could be a year they can get themselves into the playoffs.
Now let's get into a team that I've not generally been great to, UCF. Are we good? What can we hug it out? I'm in my house. It's been a rough day. Can we hug it out? Because you looked great. You really did. And I'm giving you props. UCF, you look like the real deal. All right? You were the real deal a couple of years ago, and you look like the real deal this year. And if there's going to be a year where a group of 5 team gets into the playoff, it's probably a year like this, right? I mean, who knows what's going to happen? Who knows whose games get postponed and so on and so forth. So UCF, nice job today. That was an absolute thumping of Georgia Tech. So good on you. And that's a Georgia Tech team, remember, that beat Florida State, although I don't think any of us think Florida State is all that good this year. So UCF, big ups to you. Keep it going. Playoff sleeper. You never know.
All right, that's Joel Klatt. Welcome back to the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. So you first heard Kirk Herbstreit of ESPN, followed by Aaron Taylor of CBS and Joel Klatt of Fox. Talking about UCF's postseason prospects here, and after that win at Georgia Tech, of course, non-conference schedule is over, at least as of now, as we enter conference play against ECU this coming Saturday. But laying aside the national conversation for the moment, Eric Lopez and Brian Murphy, we were just hearing a little bit about what Dylan Gabriel said on Monday, saying about he thinks UCF is the best team in the state. So here's what Dylan had to say.
I said what I said, and I was confident in it. It's up for you guys to feel whatever you guys want to feel. Everyone has the right to their opinion, but I still think we're the best team in Florida. And truly, I don't care about rankings. That's why we play the game of football. Is when you put two teams together, you see who wins, and that's all I can do is whoever they put in front of us. All we can do is play and find a way to win. So we have no control over that. From this whole COVID thing, I've realized you can only control what you can control, and all we can control is beating the team that's in front of us. And we got ECU this week, so that's all I'm focused on.
Well. Let the Twitter discussion begin, right? Is he right, Eric? Oh, go ahead.
Well, here's my question, right? With all due respect, Murph, and our media brethrens, if you will. I don't know if that's the proper terms here.
It is right. It's fine.
Thank you. I kind of was amused by the whole thing, and this all started with Dylan saying it in the post game, right, Murph, on Saturday, that UCF thought they were the best team in the state because based on the fact Georgia Tech beat Florida State, et cetera. Correct?
Yes, basically that's what he said.
So, and the media, people jumped on that. Whoa, he said they're the best team in the state. And then to the point where on Monday in the media availability, they asked him again about it. Like, hey, you said that you were the best team in the state. It was almost like, and I'm thinking to myself.
You still believe that? Like, what's he going to say? You know what? I watched the Miami game and maybe I'll change my mind. No. Like, what do you want him to say?
Right. Like, of course he thinks he's the best team in the state. He better think that they're the best team in the state. I would be worried if he answered the question like, on second thought, guys, I thought we were the third best team in the state. I saw Miami. So I'm kind of blown away that people actually made that a bigger deal than it was. Is that just because we're bored, Murph? We just need to come up with stuff here?
It's COVID. It's COVID, man. We need content.
All right, fair enough.
I don't mind the question because I'm sure that the question was asked with the intent that he would say it again. Because you want to hear him say it as much as possible because it's buzzy. It plays well. So really, the question I think was asked. Yeah, the question was asked about, do the coaches talk to you guys about maybe not being as proclamative and as sort of daring with your opinions. But really, the question was asked because he wanted Dylan to say it again, and Dylan said it again, and we're back in the cycle of like, wow, that's a good bite. It's a good sound bite, and so that's why he was asked it. And look, I have no problem with Dylan saying it. It's great that he does. It's also weird because otherwise Dylan is very much a coach speak quarterback, and it's really interesting. Like you'll ask him questions about players or situations, and he's very just by the book and kind of boring for the lack of a better term. But then sometimes he will just drop these lines that just perk your ears up, like, oh my God, what's this? And that's definitely what happened on Saturday, and it did happen again on Monday. And it's great. It's great when I love it. We love it when players are honest. We love it when players are open. We love it when players say what's on their actual minds, not things that we know sound like they could have been coming from a coach.
So let me ask this question to the both of you, starting with you, Eric. Is he right?
We'll see. I mean, it's too early.
Boo! That's such a...
Florida hasn't even played a game yet. Can we watch Florida play and Miami? Miami's played 2 games.
Well, I think right now the only data that we have is if there's anyone else, it would be based on what Miami did to Louisville.
Right. And Miami played very well. I think I actually think we actually have 3 good teams in the state with Miami, Florida, and UCF. Florida State is, whatever. They're terrible. But
Florida State's bad. Let's just say it.
Yeah, they're pretty bad. So I don't know. He has the right to say it, and I don't think he's wrong, and I hope he feels that way. I think and look, forget what he thinks. The national media tends to kind of buy into it, right? Like Kurt Herbstreit, you heard him. We should be in the playoff conversation. So the UCF fans, that whole argument about, the media hates us and this or that, that's out the window now. You don't have that anymore. I hate to break it to the UCF fans, but you're not the villains. You're not the heels anymore. You're actually the baby faces. So deal with it. Because you're going to get frustrated about the rankings and all that, but at the bottom line, it doesn't matter. But yeah, I think UCF certainly. Wouldn't a UCF Miami game be a great game? Heck yeah. I enjoy that. A UCF Florida game, I enjoy that too. So yeah, I think UCF certainly is played a high level, and it's great to see the media kind of Joe Klatt, Herbstreit kind of pump him up. So good for him to say that. I hope he keeps saying that we're the best team in the state. I just, let's not make it that's what he's supposed to say. I don't want him to what else is he going to say? So I think it's good to see. And right now UCF's playing with a swagger, and I think that's a good thing too. And when you win a lot of games, you tend to have a swagger. And I think we've seen that over the years in college football. So but can we just play a few more games before we make, judgments and decisions on who's the best and all that? I feel like we always do that, and we kind of jump to overreact.
Come on, man! It's 2020. We got teams. We got teams all over the place starting their seasons. The Big Ten's coming back, and it's all a huge mess at this point.
Big mess.
We can cover that question next week, and the answer might still be the same.
Right.
With very little data. Like, one game is not a great sense of data. It's 1 point. But let's let, like Eric's right. Let's at least wait till the teams play the games. That's all.
Yeah, we can't do that. What are we gonna talk about for the next 6 weeks?
Dylan Gabriel was asked about UCF not moving up in the rankings and said, quote, "Truly, I don't care about rankings." To which I say, props to you, young scholar.
Maybe sounds like he listens to the podcast, Murph. Maybe he listened to you. Following your lead.
We're listening to he's taking a look at whenever the what do you call it, the CFP rankings come out. Like you say, that's the most important one. And are they going to use the AP as a guide? I don't know. UCF's kind of staying right where they are right now in the rankings, and the coaches, by the way, they put the Big Ten into the rankings, which. Really? Okay. We are going to see the SEC for the first time this weekend. It's like I said, it's just going to be weird. We're playing football in state. Now we're hearing what the MAC's going to come back, trying to come back to play a 6-game slate. Everybody, baby. You get a delayed season. You get a delayed. Everybody gets a delayed season.
So much for that spring football idea concept. Yeah. Whoops. Yeah.
I tell you who I do not envy right now is the people on that CFP committee, because they're going to be making big decisions based on extremely limited data, and. I don't know.
They're going to go based on eye test, which is what they've done.
Right. And if you're UCF, you got to pass the eye test week in and week out. That's why there's UCF faces more pressure, I could argue, than any other school in the country. Especially the last 3 years. Yeah.
Oh, no.
Oh, definitely.
Hold on.
Because not only do you
more pressure,
because not only
Alabama, which if they win by 21, they still get criticized on a weekly basis.
Because ultimately within the house, that criticism doesn't matter, and they could make the playoff with one loss anyway. They have margin for error.
I don't know about that.
Now, UCF not only has to win, assuming that everything is going to happen, right? That all these teams are coming back. UCF not only has to win. Right, but now that their lone non-conference game is in the past, and was a blowout victory over an ACC team, they not only have to win the rest of their games, they have to look really good doing it.
But that's college football in general. I don't think that's any different.
No, it's not. It's not any different than Ohio State, because if Ohio State beats. Who's expected to be good? Michigan, Penn State, by a field goal. They're not gonna move down in the rankings.
No, but I mean, I think
if UCF beats Temple by 3, yeah, UCF is going to move. That's going to be looked at with a much more scrutinous eye.
And some would say rightfully so. I mean, they should blow out Temple. But here's the thing. They got to worry about winning the conference first.
Yep.
Because here's the thing, right? Last year, they won 10 games. A lot of them were blowouts. They looked nice. Hey, it was beautiful. You know what happened? They lost them 3 games, so it didn't matter. So you got to win games, first of all, and win the conference. And I think that's the first step. And I think the coaching staff and the players know that. They're not thinking ahead about, hey, we got to score by 30 or 40. We just got to go win by win. And Murph wrote about this at the Banneret. Let's not take any of this for granted either, right, Murph? Because there is no guarantee. You're guaranteed all these games every week. So let's just, rather than worry about where you're ranked and what does it mean for the playoff, how about we just, this crazy concept, enjoy the football game.
Well, let's look at this right now real quick, Murph, because we got word today USF's game is right. Postponed due to COVID-19. Tulsa's game at Arkansas State. South Florida was supposed to play FAU. Houston was supposed to play at home against North Texas. This is the 3rd time that Houston's had a game swiped out from underneath them because of COVID-19. UCF is on ABC this weekend because Notre Dame's game at Wake Forest got postponed because of COVID-19 concerns. So we still haven't put a lid on this thing yet, guys. We're still getting games wiped due to the virus. And I'm a little uncomfortable about the fact that there are so many AAC teams involved with that. That gets me worried because, what's that going to mean down the road, right?
Yeah, it wasn't a good day, I imagine, in the AAC office to see 3 games in your conference scrapped on the same day.
Yeah.
That is bad. I think for Houston, if you include all of the schedule changes with the conferences going mostly, in conference, and not playing many out-of-conference games or other conferences just shutting down entirely, I think this is the 5th game that Houston has had wiped off their schedule this year. But like you said, also the 3rd game really in a row. And I can't imagine what that's like. Again, like I wrote, we need to be grateful for every kickoff as much as we are happy for every UCF win, because getting to Saturday is a challenge for all of these teams. And I really can't imagine what it's like for these coaches and these players on the Houston Cougars to sort of like ride this roller coaster of like, okay, we're preparing for this game. Oh no, it got canceled. Okay, we're preparing for our next game. Oh no, it got canceled. We're preparing for this game. Oh no, it got canceled. That's brutal. And they're gonna go. They're not gonna play until at least October. Memphis with its cancellations are gonna go about a month between their games. It's just tough. And for UCF to not have lost a game really in season, so far,
yes.
To get off the way they did was good. Hopefully they can keep it going. I guess you could count the FIU game as a game they lost because FIU had to push their season back because they had to shut down. But for right now, like comparatively, like UCF's kind of like, knock on wood, but they've been doing a good job. At least the team, football team has. So,
but the problem is you could do everything right, and you still may lose a game because the other team has issues. So,
isn't that the case with Houston in all 3 games?
Yeah,
because
right.
Memphis had the issues. Baylor had the issues. North Texas had the issues. Houston didn't have the issues.
Right. So, I think you made that's a great article, and I encourage people to go to blackandgoldbanneret.com instead of. I know we're going to worry about rankings and why is Miami ranked, Florida ranked, but I just think, to me, this season in particular is a week-to-week. Let's get this game in. Hopefully they play well and enjoy it for that 3 to 4 hour block, and then hope we get to do it again a week later, because if I had to describe the 2020 college football season, it would be I would use the word of the Emmy Award-winning TV show Schitt's Creek. That's how I would describe this college football season.
Really, guys, we're this football season, we're all up Schitt's Creek, and I want to make sure I'm talking about the TV show there. What's funny, too, is that UCF, Josh Heupel said this on Saturday night. UCF got their all clear that they had passed their last virus test on Saturday morning at 9:30 a.m. Saturday morning in a team meeting. They took their last test, which is a rapid antigen test, I believe, on Friday in Atlanta. So they flew to Atlanta knowing they still had one more team test to go through. And so we're going to have games, as we've seen before. We've had games canceled on Fridays before. There's always a chance that might happen. We might get through a whole week. UCF might go to East Carolina on Friday, and all of a sudden something happens and nothing is played. Every day is like you just hold your breath a little bit and hope everything is fine. And we're only talking about football, not like the world at large and things that actually matter. This is only football, but for the space that we occupy, this is what we care about right now, and it's it's just exhausting.
I know. I'm telling you now. What's with that old the old Chinese proverb? May you live in interesting times. We are living in interesting times right now, man. Let me tell you, it's really been and this football season is I know you keep laughing at this, right? But I'm so glad that Josh Heupel's mantra of go 1-0 has taken on so seamlessly, because the fact remains is like the go 1-0 no longer means like just win the game. It means like just get to the game. If you get to the game every week, you've won something, right?
Right.
So
no, I thought it was very revealing. We saw this. And I don't remember, Murph, if he mentioned this in the postgame, but we saw this on the highlights package, and they even put it on the night flicks that came out on Wednesday night. But Josh Heupel, that was a big celebration in the lot. He said it was one of the best locker rooms he's ever been a part of, which kind of jumped out at me. But it tells you how much all the stress and all the stuff you can imagine that's gone through with the fact that you wondered if you even get to play this season, let alone play a game. I thought spoke volumes, right, when he said that in the postgame in Atlanta.
Absolutely, and all the players felt that too. The emotions of, wow, we finally did it. Not that we won the game, but we finally got to play the game. We finally got out here and got to enjoy each other for 3 hours and do what we love to do. And all the players shared in that. I think that's where all that emotion came from. On Saturday night, Richie Grant talked about how during the summer he thought about, maybe I should just start preparing for the NFL draft in 2021, because I don't know, as a senior, this was before the NCAA came down with its eligibility decisions. He didn't know what kind of protections there were going to be for seniors in a shortened or lost, football season. So he thought maybe if they don't give me another year, I'll just back out and start preparing for the draft. And then obviously the eligibility decision came down, and he was very, very happy about that. But it just shows you where his mind was at the summer. Otis Anderson said today, Wednesday, that certainly he thought about opting out as well, and actually kind of said that I think all the players at one time or another all had those thoughts. And that's probably the majority of college football players nationwide. And so I think to go through that from that point, where you literally don't know if you're going to play the sport you love, really, the thing that defines you as a person, as a college athlete, you really are defined by the sport you play, certainly at a football level. And if you can't do that, then who are you? And so to go through all that and to come out and play a game and it feels normal and it's 60 minutes and everything else about it feels like an actual game. Once you're done with that and you win, the exhilaration, the emotional release, that's what you saw there, and it's a special moment.
Yeah, and here's to hopefully having that again this Saturday up at ECU, because again, the start of conference play, ECU's playing their first game of the season. This is going to be, and again, COVID problems that have been dogging ECU throughout the entire time. This is finally their chance to take the field. And what are we going to get? Well, we're going to find out noon. ABC. Once again, 2 straight weeks on ABC. Eric, what are we thinking for TV numbers in that noon time slot now?
Well, I think it depends, because, example, we talk about games get played or not. As we record this Wednesday night, there's some people that wonder, for example, one of the competitions at noon is the Oklahoma-Kansas State game at noon. Kansas State's safe. They're playing with walk-ons right now because they've had some issues with COVID. So there's some questions whether that game still gets played or not. We may not know, to Murph's point, until Friday for sure, or, if the game gets played or not. So, you got Florida and Ole Miss on ESPN. You've got the Oklahoma game potentially on Fox. So that's tough competition there. I think if you get $1.5 million to $2 million, I think you're all things considered, you're satisfied. because as you know, a lot of it will depend. If that game's a blowout early, people will tune out and go somewhere else, whether it be the Oklahoma game or the Florida game. And with it being the first SEC game of the year, I think there'll be a lot of eyeballs on that game in particular, and obviously eyeballs on the Oklahoma game because that's the first Big 12 conference game. So tougher, stiff challenge. But if you can get $1.5 million to $2 million, it's okay. Anything above $2 million, I think you take it as a celebration there. But look, the reason that happened, yes, the Notre Dame game obviously got postponed. That helped, but they drew $3 million for the Georgia Tech game, which was a good number in that slot. It's the fourth largest UCF football telecast nationally all time in a regular season game. And I think the networks were happy with this. And while I agree with Murph and Dylan Gabriel that the rankings don't matter, I agree with 99% of it. There is the 1%. And Jeff, you alluded to it, and that is that ranking does help you get TV time slots. Mm-hmm. And I think like UCF being ranked it helps in that matter. If UCF was unranked, that game stays probably on ESPN Plus. But because it's ranked, it becomes an attractive option to put on ABC as opposed to some of the other options they had. Now, it is worth mentioning, some people have asked this question, and I wrote this on Black and Gold Banneret. We have all the details here exclusively on the Banneret. The SEC, up until for the next any SEC games cannot be on ABC because CBS is the exclusive rights holder to network games airing SEC games.
Yeah, over the air broadcast, right?
Over the air. Now, that will change at around 2024 when ESPN takes over the entire rights to the SEC, unless they buy out CBS before that. But until then, so as a result, the SEC cannot air on ABC. And so that took away those as options. And then you look at the rest of the options, and I think they decided that UCF ECU was the best option there. And again, it helped the fact that UCF brought some eyeballs the week before in drawing that $3 million for the Georgia Tech game. Now, I do have to ask this question, Jeffrey, because we kind of avoided, thankfully, a topic that we were going to have to address if this game would have stayed on ESPN Plus, because there's obviously some people would have been upset. They were already griping about, well, we got to go on ESPN Plus and things. I want to point out a listener who tweeted at us at UCF_Banneret, who asked this question as a result of the TV numbers and all that. And he asked Cleddy Lee, the Twitter, a shout out to him, to the person listening. And he asked the question, can Mike Oresco renegotiate the TV deal? This has been a topic because people aren't happy with the ESPN Plus deal. Do you want to address that first, Jeffrey, as somebody that because we've addressed this a lot. We've had Michael Smith on from the Sports Business Journal, but I feel like give you the first reins on this.
Like, well, why?
Well, let me bring up two questions. There's two things that I think are fair questions to ask, and I think the deal at the end of the day, Mike Oresco, by the way, should get credit because this. Under last year's contract, UCF would not have been able to be on ABC because odds are this game would have been on CBS Sports Network.
Exactly.
So let's bring that out. The fact you stayed on ESPN ABC has this bigger platform. So that helps. There are two questions that I think are fair to ask. The length of the deal, 12 years, which apparently there's no opt-outs. So to answer Cleddy's question, no, they technically, officially, he can't renegotiate. However, as Jeffrey, you could, as somebody who's worked in television, just because the contract says you can't renegotiate right now, doesn't mean down the road things may not change. There's always a loophole here and there they could find. Maybe.
Yeah. Well, especially in the case of the Americans contract, because if teams leave, then that gives ESPN the option to essentially reopen negotiations. And I think that it did occur with UConn, but I didn't hear of any updates on it from there. But
probably because TV realized UConn brings no value in football, and they said we're going to lose more money. Actually, we'll lose money if we keep UConn in football. So thank you, Lee. Thank you for leaving.
Yeah, but in general, like, this is why you want to keep that relationship with ESPN and Disney, so solid, right? Is because it gives you the opportunity. It gives you a much better opportunity to be on ABC in the event that those things kind of happen. And I get that everyone's like, well, shoot, I'm not going to be able to watch the game on ESPN Plus. Well, yes, you are. All right, go. It's what, $5.99 a month. I mean, and whether we like it or not, that's where things are going to be headed, right?
Across the board.
We don't know, and right now we don't know, and this is something that I've seen from a number of places, is that COVID-19 sped everything up about 10 years in terms of business, especially in the media business. So we're going to see more and more games on ESPN+. We're going to see more and more non-football events on ESPN+. And personally, I don't. If you're UCF, you kind of don't mind that because A, you can always get picked up if something goes wrong, and B, you're still you're still under that umbrella, right? So you can produce, we don't know, at least as of right now, who's going to produce these games. But, I'd rather have ESPN doing it than CBS, which doesn't even factor into the ratings, at least as of right now. So
I agree with that. And it's important. Look, the ESPN Plus thing, it is part of the future. I will say, if I were to tweak some things there, I wish they would have a deal where, for example, and I don't know if Murph qualifies this, but if you're you subscribe to HBO, you could get HBO Max as part of the deal.
Mm-hmm.
If I wish they would have done where ESPN Plus was, if you were a subscriber to all the ESPN platforms, that ESPN Plus could have been included, and just leave that for the people that weren't.
Well, I think that if you're an ESPN Plus subscriber, you do get bundled in for like what used to be Insider. I think is that right?
Right, I think so, but you still got to pay. Whereas, other words, for example, if you have, I have my cable package, I have all the ESPN channels, so in theory, I would have liked to have gotten ESPN Plus, as a part of that, because I'm already paying for the other ESPN. So I understand some of the questions there, but at the end of the day, here's what I would say. South Florida this week played Notre Dame. Big deal, right? Except they got moved to USA Network because NBC had golf, the U.S. Open. It did a terrible number. And you know why? Because
it was on USA. No.
Right. And I think
I haven't watched USA since the Cartoon Express was on.
Well, here's the thing. If you're a college football fan, you have no reason to ever go to USA Network. And I think we sometimes take for granted just the familiarity of knowing, hey, I know if I tune in on Sunday at 1 o'clock on CBS or Fox, there's going to be an NFL game on. Or if I'm tuning into ABC or ESPN on a Saturday, there's going to be college football on. I think that there is value to that still that I think gets lost a lot of times. And I think we saw an example of that. Again, that's why it's not an accident. If you look at UCF's 4 most watched regular season games of all time nationally, the South Carolina game in 2013, the South Florida game in 2017, the Cincinnati primetime game in 2018, and this Georgia Tech game. What do they all have in common?
ABC.
That's
on the broadcast network. Yep.
Yeah, and if that game is on NBC Sports Network, nobody's watching it because people aren't used to going to that channel to watch college football. They're used to going there for something else. So to me, that's and no offense, Murph, but that's one of the issues that Major League Baseball has had, as we'll segue it to Knights and the pros, with the postseason coming up. A lot of times part of the issue that baseball has is where is the baseball playoff game on? Because a lot of people are not still used to tuning into TBS on a regular basis to catch a baseball game. They're used to ESPN or Fox. So in the industry, that's been part of the conversations. And that's one of the reasons why the NFL in their next TV deal is more than likely going to keep it on Fox, CBS, NBC, and probably ABC will be in the mix because people are used to seeing football on those networks.
Well, baseball has a ton of issues. Actually, baseball has a Schitt's Creek ton of issues. I want to make sure I'm talking about the TV show. And so, yeah, it's just it's more than just that. But I totally agree with all your conversation there. That this is great for UCF. Like, bottom line, it's really good.
It is. It is great. It is tremendous. And I think we should just enjoy the fact that UCF now is a player. They're becoming a player in the sports television industry from a football standpoint, where before it's like, oh, man, do we have to put them on? Now, networks like ESPN, hey, you know what? Let's put them on. And I think that's a positive. And I think it's positive for the league. And I know, and again, I keep getting asked about the $7 million a year and all that. The next step for the league is to get a bigger TV deal because, there's still a lot of questions about the league. Who's going to join UCF as a consistent TV ratings watcher? In other words, can a Cincinnati with Luke Fickell be consistent. And Kurt Herbstreit brought this up on the podcast. I know we played the clip at the beginning. He made a great point. UCF now has been around for a few years, and I, with all due respect to the O'Leary era, there was such a roller coaster that you didn't know what you were going to get on a given year most of the time. Whereas since 2017, you kind of know what you've gotten from UCF. They have an identity, and you've been around. And he mentioned the comparison to Boise State. That matters in television. The next step for the American is, can a Cincinnati join UCF and be consistent? And can they draw eyeballs to television? Can a Houston bounce back and become significant? If you're the American, that's what you need. And if that happens, guess what? You're going to start making more money from a television standpoint down the road.
Yeah, it's something that, the American has had sort of a revolving door of competitors, and we were talking about it earlier. At one time, it was ECU. Now, obviously, Cincinnati's kind of in there, and Memphis is having their moment too. But what's it going to look like this year? I don't know. There's a lot of questions that we still have to answer, and we're going to start, obviously, with this game noon on Saturday, UCF against ECU on ABC, like you mentioned.
Dave Pash, Mike Golick Sr. on the
yes. And they're not going to be there in person. They're going to be at their respective man caves, I guess you could say.
Yeah, they'll be joining Murph and you and me, all of us watching on TV.
All of us watching on TV the game from Greenville. So we'll be watching it. Murph, I know you'll be keeping track of things. We'll all be on Twitter following along very, very closely. And what else do we have coming up? I know you're going to have your checklist coming out too, right?
Well, we got some. Well, first of all, you got to let Murph know about the bad. Murph's got to break the.
Oh, that's
bad
right. We do have some
this week.
We're really going to make us end on bad news, Eric. I was trying to avoid it.
We got to address it. I mean, let's be fair to Murph. Murph is a big baseball guy. One of the reasons he couldn't join us for the interview is he was a little bummed out because Dylan Moore has been a big part of this show, carried us when we didn't have football. But it looks like, Murph, our campaign for the American League MVP has come to an abrupt end.
Yeah, I'm like the guy who has the unfortunate job of walking around an NFL locker room at the end of preseason to tell guys they've been cut. That's basically what I am here at the end of this show. Yes, Dylan Moore, who, let's be honest, has had the best season of any UCF alum in Major League Baseball ever. And I know it's not a very big list, but still, it's true. He's not going to play for the rest of the year. Granted, the season is only only has a few more days left in it, but he's been put on the concussion IL because Dylan Moore's had a really bad run of luck. And I don't mean to laugh, but it's just weird how his season has ended. About a week ago, I think 7 days ago exactly, he got hit in the head with a 98.7 mile an hour fastball. He stayed down for about 45 seconds, then got up, went to first base, and stayed in the game for a bit. And so whatever, that was fine. He went on to play some more games later on. And then last night, or I believe 2 days ago, he was hit in the head again with another fastball at 92.2 miles an hour. And I think at this point, the Mariners, whose season is done, effectively just said, let's not even fool around with that. They put him on the DL.
No, what they said was, Dylan, you're way too valuable. We're shutting you down.
Yeah, basically. I mean, really, it is. It's just concussion IL, being cautious. But I just want to, as we sort of wrap his season, Dylan Moore came into this year as nothing really more than a utility player who teams wanted to have around because he was good. He gave you flexibility defensively. He could play third base. He could play left field. He could play shortstop or second. And that's why he made the Mariners roster. Really, he was one of the last guys to make the Mariners 30-man roster. Because, again, last year, his slash line, 206 batting average, 302 on base, 389 slugging. And now this year, 255, 358, 496. And that was with a late season slump, which saw his average drop by about 40 points. He crushed fastballs. He had a 330. He had like a 340 average on fastballs this year, and slugged over 600 on fastballs. He had a lot of hard hit balls with what we call barrels. If you look at barrel rate, which means basically how perfectly do you hit the ball in terms of exit velocity and launch angle, he's among the top 40 players in major leagues as far as replicating those kind of events. He really kind of came into his own as a hitter, and all of a sudden has now transformed from being a utility player possibly being a guy that the Mariners keep, maybe near the top of their lineup next season, which is just it's amazing how his career has blossomed here in this past year. For a guy who is 27, he's not exactly young, but he's really come into his own.
What do we make of his prospects for 2021? Is he like a guarantee now to make the team next year?
He's absolutely guaranteed. Yes, he's a guarantee to make the team. I would, we'll see what they do. The Mariners are in a long rebuilding phase here, and so we'll see what they do with their lineup. But like right now, I would say I'd pencil him in for, probably second in the lineup. But, maybe if they get some better production out of the guys who are coming up through their minors league system, maybe he moves down to like seventh or eighth. But what we're saying now is that, this time last year to say that Dylan Moore is locked into a starting 9 spot in a Major League Baseball team, it was kind of nuts. Like, why would you do that? The guy can't really hit, and all he's good for is like late inning defensive replacements. And he, whatever it was, he solved those issues. And he still strikes out too much, but like really, who doesn't in the major leagues? Other than like 4 or 5 guys. It just,
Wow, that's right. Who doesn't strike out? Everybody strikes out.
Way to slough that one off.
I mean, really, that's just the game. That is the game. And really, I think Dylan understands too. Like, you have to sort of give that up to sort of, you have to give up your contact in order to provide power. And all of a sudden, Dylan Moore hitting 8 home runs in 38 games. Guys, that extrapolates out to a 30 home run season, and I'm not sure if I'm ready for Dylan Moore to have a 30 home run season. That doesn't compute in my mind, but that's the kind of guy he was this year.
So, with Dylan Moore now season over, who's going to pick up the UCF alums slack here with the playoffs starting a week from now? Like at this time, I don't know what we're going to do, Jeffrey, because we normally record on Wednesday night. Well, next Wednesday night, there's going to be 8 playoff games going on. I don't know how Murph's going to handle all that, but who can we look for some UCF, juju here in the postseason?
Well, the only guy we've got is Dan Winkler, because the Rockies aren't going to make it, the Mariners aren't going to make it, and Bo Taylor is at the alternate site for the Indians as their third catcher. So really, it's just Dan Winkler. But as we talked about on the last show, he's done pretty well. But since that last show, he's had 2 relief appearances in which he gave up runs and hasn't pitched the last couple days. But he'll still probably make the Cubs playoff roster. He'll be in middle relief, hopefully in some high leverage situations. But that's the one guy. That's the only guy that UCF fans can latch on to here in the baseball playoffs, unless Cleveland suffers some sort of catching injury in the next few days, in which they have to call up Bo Taylor.
That's from a player standpoint. That's true, but Chad Mottola, UCF Athletic Hall of Famer, hitting coach with the Rays, the American League East champion Tampa Bay Rays.
Yes.
I want to mention that over again. What is your thoughts on Chad Mottola, the job he's done, and could this, depending on how they do in this postseason, could he become a managing candidate in Major League Baseball? Because the Rays have had a bunch of guys end up going to become managers from the Rays system, like Charlie Montoyo, Dave Martinez, Rocco Baldelli. Could depending on how they do this postseason, could Chad Mottola become a name? Because the Rays quietly have been one of the highest scoring run offenses in baseball.
No, absolutely. I don't know his managerial prospects. I'm not even sure if, obviously you would like a payday and more notoriety, but I'm not sure. Sometimes guys don't want those gigs. They like where they're at. So I don't know that with Chad. I will say that if you thought the Tampa Bay Rays were going to have the second best record in Major League Baseball by the end of this weird season, look, we all thought they were going to be a playoff team. I think we all thought about that. But we thought their pitching was going to carry them and that they were going to score enough runs. Instead, what's happened is they've really battled through so many pitching injuries, and guys have had really good offensive seasons. And so, no, it's a lot of credit to Chad Mottola. If you want to root for UCF alum, you can root for the Rays as well, which I'm sure plenty of our listeners already do.
How convenient.
The Rays being the 1 seed in the American League playoffs, that is a thing that is about 95% going to happen.
Wow. Tell you, man, what a weird year, 2020. More baseball coming our way. We got 8 teams in each league heading in, and best of 3 first round. I've been asking for that for years, and I finally got it. Thank goodness.
Oh, you're the worst.
I am. Listen, I own it. I just wish that they played all 3 games at the home field advantage teams site, but they're doing it neutral site anyway. So
listen, I'm a Marlins fan. We may or may not get in. You realize we've lost games in this month by like 20 runs, 11 runs, and 15 runs, and we might still make the playoffs. That's probably a problem with your playoff format. I'm just saying, with all due respect. I don't think we should be in the playoffs.
Well, no, you want to get into the playoffs, Eric, because every time the Marlins make the playoffs, they win the World Series.
Well, if that happened this year, then boy, that's
they've been seriously. They've been in the playoffs twice and won the World Series twice. What more do you want?
Well, probably some better pitching right now because we're get out of Atlanta. We can't get anybody out on the Braves. Can we just do that? Get them out.
All right.
I will say that with 4 days to go in the season, the Marlins are a game clear in the playoffs. They would need, I think, 2 teams to pass them. So it's looking okay, Eric. I mean, I don't want to count those eggs yet.
Well, are your Yankees going to lay down and give us a game or 2 here? I mean, or what are you guys going to do?
Well, I think the Yankees are pretty much locked into the 4-5 game.
Yeah, just take a nosedive. Just play your backup.
Yeah,
please.
with either Cleveland or either Minnesota or the White Sox. I have enough problems with the Yankees that we can't really get into.
Don't even get me started.
We'll be fine. It'll be fun to watch baseball. I'm excited for this year to see what this looks like. But yeah, I'm definitely not a fan of the expanded playoffs. It makes what is already a laborious and interminable, season become even more worthless. And it's just not.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
All right. Can we please end on a positive note here? Send the folks home with something good.
Here's the positive note. Blake Bortles is back in the NFL.
That's right.
Blake Bortles.
Blake is back. He's with the Denver Broncos. And here's this. He's going to be backing up Jeff Driscoll. So at one point, as I tweeted earlier this week, Oviedo is the new Western Pennsylvania because we have simultaneous graduates of Haggerty High School and Oviedo High School, both in the same quarterback room in the NFL with the Denver Broncos, because Driscoll went to Haggerty, same time that Blake was at Oviedo. Of course, Driscoll's career, we know how that went in college, but Bortles, we know how his career went in college, and then obviously skipped away in the pros. But with the injury to Drew Lock, who was coached to prominence by one Josh Heupel at the University of Missouri. Wow, what an interesting moment that will be.
That is phenomenal.
I'm telling you, man.
Good.
Could you imagine? I wish I'd known who had won the game, because I know Oviedo played Haggerty at some point in 2009, I think, right? I mean,
right. I don't know. That's a good question. We're gonna have to reach out to the Denver Broncos media relations and figure that out. I mean, we got AJ Bouye too, reunited with Blake.
Yep.
I mean, I gotta say, if he can somehow get on the field with Jerry Jeudy, my boy KJ Hamler, Noah Fant, that's pretty good for Blake.
And it could be better with Cortland Sutton or Phillip Lindsay, but they have so many injuries. And I'm going to be like the Eeyore of this podcast. I'm totally bought into it now. I'm fine. That like Blake Bortles is going to go out there and probably fall behind by 20 points, and then like somehow score 3 touchdowns, but come up just short, because that's what he's done his entire career at Jacksonville.
Isn't that Gardner Minshew right now?
But he's actually playing pretty well.
Oh, he really is.
It's amazing that Gardner Minshew's playing well, but we digress. I will also give props to Gabe Davis on his first career NFL touchdown, and not your run-of-the-mill NFL touchdown. A laying flat out with the ball. Somehow the nose of the ball does not touch the ground. I'm not sure how it didn't. And he catches a clutch touchdown in a close game between Miami and Buffalo this past weekend. Acrobatic, athletic, great hands, all the things we know that Gabe Davis can do. Fantastic.
By the way, 2009, Haggerty defeated Oviedo 35-28 behind one Jeff Driscoll. So there's that. Playing against Blake Bortles, nonetheless. And that game was at Haggerty, by the way, just north of UCF's campus. So
I'm sure there'd be an article on that in the Denver Post.
No, yeah. Well, there is video here in the on YouTube of it. I'm actually looking at it right now, and Haggerty won the district. They clinched the district championship with that win. So they're holding up a trophy and everything that year. So it's pretty cool. All right, we will send that immediately to our SB Nation friends who cover the Denver Broncos. So.
And I think we're just stalling for time here as we wait to congratulate Eric Lopez on Miami be going up 3-1 in the American Eastern
Let's
Conference.
Go, baby! Yeah, woo! Thank you for talk. Yes, Taco Fall, unfortunately, down to one more loss away from being out of the bubble. But sorry, Taco, but
we love Taco. It's no hard feelings, But
just not personally, yeah. The Heat have just gone up 3-1, so I can now breathe a little bit, but hopefully it works out for Blake. Traquan had a good Monday night game too, and Michael Thomas is absent, so that was good to see. That was some of the other. That was really where that's the only storylines that had jumped out to me from a UCF NFL weekend, right?
Yeah, pretty much. Traquan had that really nice catch and run where he fought off a few guys. That was really special. Kind of worried about that Saints offense without Michael Thomas though. It'll be interesting to see if Traquan.
Can somebody knock on Bill O'Brien's door, hit him in the head, and say, "Play Jordan Akins already. Stop playing this Fells guy at tight end, for God's sake."
Well, it's because Darren Fells is a good blocker, basically. Now, they shouldn't have Darren Fells running routes, and that's the problem. See, Darren Fells scored a touchdown last weekend that totally should have belonged to Jordan Akins because Darren Fells should not be running routes. It should be Jordan Akins. They're both the same size. But Akins is he's more of a mismatch. He's more athletic. He's just a more dangerous threat. And so, yeah, he can't block that as well. But I don't care. I want to see him running down the seam. And at least it's positive that he has gotten, I believe, 80% of the snaps in the first two games, which that didn't happen in back-to-back games last year. So certainly his role is growing in Houston. I've said it since the beginning of the year. He is the one UCF alum among all the guys that are in the league that I think can have a real breakout, by definition, a breakout campaign. Because Houston needs receiving targets. My God, they need receiving targets. DeAndre Hopkins, come back, please. And he is.
Yeah, so Deshaun Watson's asking that. Is probably begging for that too.
Yeah, and DeAndre, and so Jordan's a mismatch. But Bill O'Brien's a bad coach. There's a lot of bad coaches.
Why can't he just join the Giant staff with all the other mediocre coaches?
Well, they'll fire.
Don't worry, they'll find a way to get him on staff eventually.
They'll have Bill O'Brien be the quality control coach.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. When they fire Jason Garrett as the offensive coordinator, they'll install Bill O'Brien.
I want to say this is a really good ending to this podcast. We had Dylan Moore getting beamed in the head twice. We had me slandering Blake Bortles, but not really slander. Let's be honest. Not really. Bill O'Brien's an awful coach.
And the Giants are going nowhere.
Giants
I'm cheering against Taco Fall in the conference final.
We are not.
In my defense, he hasn't played, so am I technically?
Here's the thing: we are cheering for the Heat and Taco Fall. We want Taco Fall to do well. We want the Heat to do well. The two things can happen at the same time.
As a Lakers fan, all of Boston Celtics, except for Taco, could go fall into a pit of fire for all that I really care about. Oh my God. So it's fine with me. Also, this is great. Let's just wrap it up because this thing has gone completely off the rails.
We've got this last segment has really been taken forever. Sorry, everybody. Make sure you follow us at UCF_Banneret on Twitter. Of course, follow us individually at Jeff_Sharon, Eric Lopez Elo, and Spokes_Murphy, especially on Saturday, where we will be following the game. Noon kickoff on ABC. Don't forget to get all of our latest news, our daily newsletter from Jeremy Brenner. Also, don't forget to follow all the rest of our staff members at Black and Gold Banneret, including Andrew Glukov at Statboy Drew, Danny Medina at Danny Medina News, and also, of course, Jeremy at Jeremy Brenner. And again, huge thanks to everybody who makes this all happen week in and week out. This is our time to shine here with football. So it was good to write about football again last week. It's going to be good to write about it again. Hopefully we can keep on going and not lose any games to COVID issues, and it would be a good thing for everybody as we can keep this thing moving forward. All right, for Eric and Brian, I'm Jeff. Thank you so much for listening. This has been the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. Enjoy the game at noon on ABC on Saturday. Catch you next week.